You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Good Friday, 18th of April 2014. Romanian Gypsy aims to earn £40,000 on benefits during just 1 year in Britain. 1,000 worshippers gather for Southend Mosque opening. Unmarked police car stolen from the Doddinghurst home of a sleeping Met police officer. Foreigner convicted in Finland of aggravated sexual assault of 13-year-old pleads ignorance, says it's legal back home. Pope washes feet of 12 disabled, including a Muslim. Nick Griffin, MEP from the belly of the beast. Rate of Christian girls abducted and attacked by extremists on the rise in Egypt. Adelaide-based Sheikh Sharif Hussein free to preach race hate. Thought for the day, Rochdale, oh how are thy fallen. And finally, Scrabble anyone? UK News. Romanian Gypsy aims to earn £40,000 on benefits during just 1 year in Britain. Father of three, Ion Lazar, moved to the UK just days after restrictions on migrants from Romania and Bulgaria were lifted on January the 1st this year. In a new Channel 5 documentary which was broadcast 11th of April, Mr Lazar says he hopes to gather the eye-watering sum so he can build a new house for his family back in Romania. The 36-year-old says, I know it's very, very easy to take benefits in England. She give me home free, she's give me money free, she give me everything. I need maybe 40,000 from benefits, £40,000 for my family, and I think this money I can make in 1 year's maybe too. Gypsies on Benefits and Proud looked at the lives of 3 Roma gypsy families who have moved to the UK. One gypsy revealed how he's able to claim £750 in monthly taxpayer handouts, while others are shameless about how very, very easy it is to claim benefits in the United Kingdom. Slovakian Roma Katerina Sizarova, 43, lives with 11 children and 11 grandchildren in and around an estate in Rotherham. In the 7 years she's lived in the UK, she's worked for only a handful of days. She lives with her unemployed husband Peter and their 4 youngest kids who are teenagers. They receive an incredible £430 a week. Viorel Dinu, 25, lost both his legs in an accident when he was 7-year-old and now moves around on a skateboard. While he had to beg for a living in Romania, he is able to claim a staggering £750 a month on benefits in Nottingham. World at 8. We shouldn't let foreign cripples in anyway, and that goes for Asians and Africans as well as Eastern Europeans. What gets me, and eludes all the other political parties, is that there are at least 2 generations of British English workers who are in fact paying for these people, and it is the establishment, bankers and governments who are playing God in the distribution of other people's money. Deport or make life difficult for all these parasites. Not easy come, easy go. We have human rights as well, don't we? I'm going to change my name from Mozart to Lazar. 1,000 worshippers gather for Southend Mosque opening. 1,000 people turned out for the grand opening of a mosque in Southend. The Essex Jam Masjid Mosque in Chelmsford Avenue was formally opened by Southend Mayor Brian Kelly. A host of other dignitaries were in attendance. Southend MPs David Amos and James Duddridge were both guests, along with former MP Teddy Taylor, who gave a speech. World at 8. The misnomers in the word dignitaries, more like bloody fools. Unmarked police car stolen from Doddinghurst home of a sleeping Metropolitan Police officer. An unmarked police car belonging to the Metropolitan Police has been stolen near Brentwood. The blue Skoda Octavia estate car was stolen from outside the house of a police officer in the Met who lives in Doddinghurst. It is thought the house was burgled, the keys stolen and the car taken without the thief realising it was an unmarked police car at 12:30 a.m. on Thursday, April 17th. Police are urging motorists to report any sightings of the car, which has a DE12 plate, blue police lights and 2-tone sound fitted to the car. As police spokesman said, "We want to make motorists aware that this car is not being driven by a police officer, and so they should not pull over if requested to do so by the driver, who is probably the individual who stole it. We would ask people to see this car on the road to report it to police immediately. Anyone with information in connection with the whereabouts of this car should contact police on 999 or Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. European news. Foreigner convicted in Finland of aggravated sexual assault of 13-year-old pleads ignorance and says it's legal back home. Eastern Finland Court of Appeal increased the judgment in the case of a 13-year-old girl being abused by a man. The Court of Appeal sentenced the man for aggravated sexual abuse of a child for 1 year and a 3-month suspended prison sentence. North Savo District Court had condemned the man for child sexual abuse with a 10-month suspended prison sentence. The 23-year-old man was twice with the 13-year-old girl, first having sex with her in a stairwell and then at a friend's house. According to the Court of Appeals, the man lied about the girl's age, took advantage of the girl's love, sexual intercourse took place on the man's initiative, and they had unprotected sex. Age difference of 10 years, and this was not by any means an equal relationship, and on behalf of the 13-year-old girl, she hadn't the development or capacity to consent to sexual intercourse. The man will have to pay the girl $5,000 compensation for damages. World at 8. There is no hint as to the ethnicity or religion of this guy, but I would bet millions on him being Muslim and of practically any colour that entails. Pope washes feet of 12 disabled, including a Muslim. Pope Francis washed and kissed the feet of 12 disabled youngsters and elderly people, including a young Libyan Muslim, in the traditional Holy Thursday Mass at a top Catholic clinic in Rome. This year's Holy Thursday liturgy, which recalls Jesus washing the feet of his apostles at the Last Supper shortly before the crucifixion, took place at the Fondazione Don Carlo Gnocchi at Via Casal di Marmo in the Italian capital. The Fondazione is one of Italy's best-known bodies for the care of the elderly, including the terminally ill and disabled children. The 12 disabled people ranged from 16 to 86 years of age and included 3 foreigners. Before Mass began, the Pope stopped to greet dozens of wheelchair-bound people sitting in the front rows, as well as their relatives, caregivers and volunteers. Francis, who has gained popularity by his humble, homey style, plain living and concern for those left behind by capitalism and his plans to reform a scandal-hit church, made headlines at last year's pre-Easter ritual by washing the feet of juvenile offenders, including female Muslims. Belly of the Beast. I now hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP, who talks today about his last speech in the EU Parliament, the murder of democracy in Greece and the drumbeats of World War III.
The big news for nationalists this week was that the Brussels-imposed puppet government of Italy moved on Wednesday to deny Italy's increasingly angry voters the right even to have a chance of choosing a party which would end the crucifixion of their country and people by banksters' debts and EU austerity. The regime's police used blatant repression to prevent Italy's only effective nationalist party, Forza Nuova, New Force, from collecting and submitting the 300,000 signatures that are needed in Italy for any party to stand in the European elections. The official campaign to prevent Forza Nuova standing has been going on for several weeks. All over Italy, party activists were denied the official forms and documents needed to collect and submit the lists. This part of the operation was aimed at wasting precious time. British National Party officials will be well aware of the similar kind of problems that we sometimes have with local returning officers. But here it tends to be the exception rather than the rule. In this case in Italy, it was very widespread. Meanwhile, in Perugia, in central Italy, campaigners were arrested when they went to the town hall offices to collect the forms they needed to get the last wave of voters to sign. Then they were held without reason or charge in local police stations and only released once the deadline for handing in their completed nominations had passed. A ploy even more familiar to BNP officials was the action of the police in Treviso, where they made late-night threatening visits to the homes of FN sympathisers to try to intimidate them into saying that their signatures on the party's lists were forged. This, of course, is exactly what was done in Maryport just a few months ago, where the police visited everyone that we'd signed up for postal votes, and in particular for proxy votes, In the end, as you know, the police had to drop any action against Councillor Dawn Charlton, but in the meantime, it was all headlines in the local newspapers, etc., and aimed at intimidating people into not supporting the Nationalist Party. What happens in Italy happens in Britain, and vice versa. Back in Italy, also in the last few weeks, far-left thugs have launched a rampant nationwide campaign of intimidation of members of the public who signed the Forza Nuova list. And of course, the police turned blind eyes to the threat of violence that went along with these approaches. In Britain, actually, this is, of course, more often done by local newspapers who call on people and try to intimidate them into saying they didn't know who they signed for. But in our case, we're only talking about 10 people per candidate. In Italy, they had to get 300,000. So such intimidation really has a hard effect on the party. The most ridiculous and disruptive of the undemocratic police actions was in Tuscany in Veneto, where Forza Nuova activists, out collecting the final signatures they needed, or even taking them to the town halls for submission, were dragged from their cars by heavy-handed police and held in various police stations on account of, quote, crimes not yet committed, unquote. All these victims were held until the deadline for submitting the signatures had passed. Then they were freed without charge, because of course they'd done nothing wrong, but by that time the state had got exactly what it wanted. Announcing the suspension of Forza Nuova's bid to contest the election, its leader, Roberto Fiore, criticised not merely these blatantly undemocratic police actions, but also the very law that makes it necessary to collect 3,000 signatures in every electoral district in the country, 300,000 overall, a huge task for any new or smaller party, which is automatically designed to favour the people already with the power and the money to build their organisations. In addition, Mr Fiore noted the pro-austerity establishment's parallel ploy to keep the population under control. The BBC's promotion of UKIP as a pseudo-nationalist safety valve party is matched in Italy by the system's promotion of various parties like M5S, just like UKIP, anti-Euro but in fact pro-immigration, the pro-Lisbon Treaty, Northern League, or the Brothers of Italy, who just a few months ago supported the Euro but now claim, very conveniently, to have changed their minds. Quote from Mr Fiore: "These attacks on our right to stand and on the voters' right to choose have reduced this election to being just another Truman show, played out to try to confer a shred of spurious legitimacy to a system that now lacks any legitimacy at all. We will be bringing legal action over the illegal detention of our brave militants, but at the same time we will be redoubling our efforts to develop new fields of action where we're fighting on ground that we pick rather than on the establishment's and terms." He concludes, "This latest development will certainly make it even easier for us to convince angry Italians that we're the only real alternative to the rotten system that robs and oppresses them. As the financial situation out there worsens, there will come a time when to have been accepted by the system will be the political kiss of death, but to have been persecuted by the system will not just be a badge of honour, but also the key to our people's hearts." Unquote. Well said, Roberto. Meanwhile, this week I was in Strasbourg for the final plenary session of the 2009-2014 European Parliamentary Legislature. How time flies. I did rise in the final day's voting to try to make a point of order. Interestingly, Nicky Sinclair, formerly of UKIP, had been allowed to use a point of order the day before to make a thoroughly self-serving, albeit on a good cause, speech about the anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster. Nothing whatsoever to do with the European Parliament, and certainly nothing to do with the point of order. I rose to speak at the beginning of a set block of votes, all of them criticising Russia, and I wanted to make the point that we needed a debate into the EU puppet regime in Italy, and similarly in Greece, locking up their political opponents without any reason whatsoever, and that it would be hypocritical to vote on so-called repression in Russia, while repression for which the European Union is actually responsible is going on in its own backyard, and it was actually going on at that moment. Nicky Sinclair was allowed to speak. I was allowed to speak and cut off within about 10 seconds. I hope you'll be able to see it on BNP TV fairly soon. I nevertheless was able to make my point about the disgraceful murder of democracy in Greece with the attacks on Golden Dawn, and in Italy with the attacks on Forza Nuova, and in both cases the attacks on the right of ordinary voters to choose or not to choose those parties. I was able to make a speech on this because I stayed for the afternoon when there was a debate, attended by very few, I have to say, about the evils of the communist regime in North Korea. Quite so. Most communist regimes are fairly evil, and of course it's the last open one. But I use this as an opportunity to speak about regimes which arrest their opponents and lock them up on purely spurious grounds, and then pointed out I wasn't talking about North Korea, but about Greece and Italy. So the speech, which was actually the penultimate one made by anyone in the whole of the 5 years, went down like a lead balloon. But I know that our comrades in Greece and Italy are very pleased to have someone speaking out for them. We all have to stand together, nationalists all over Europe, in fact all over the world, because the drumbeats of war are getting louder every day. There's a horrendous story in today's Daily Mail. It's actually in papers all over Britain, the United States, all over the West, in fact. The warmongers are at it again. The opening subheadings summed up the flavour of the propaganda, the latest wave of propaganda against President Putin and pushing for eventual war against Russia. Quote, in a chilling echo of the Holocaust, Jews are ordered to register and list property in East Ukraine after pro-Russian militants take over government buildings. US condemns leaflets urging Jews in East Ukraine to register. Secretary of State John Kerry calls pamphlet found in Donetsk grotesque. Jews also reportedly asked to register lists of their own property. I quote further, a pamphlet handed out in Donetsk orders citizens of Jewish nationality over the age of 16 to pay $50 to register and to be issued special passports. The leaflets, a chilling echo of Nazi persecution, were handed out to Jews leaving a local synagogue by 3 men in ski masks holding the flag of the Russian Federation, Israeli media reports. Have you ever heard such a blatant hoax? 3 men in ski masks. Were they radical Zionists trying to frighten ordinary Jews and giving them donations? Were they members of the Ukrainian secret police or one of the actual fascist groups which allowed themselves, disgracefully permitted themselves, to be used by the US and the EU to have their mock revolution earlier on this year in Ukraine? Or were they members of Blackwater or some other US mercenary team? Who can tell? But when even the reports said in the small print that the local authorities and the local pro-Russian people were saying this is nothing to do with us, it's patently obvious that it was a hoax. The fact of the matter in the Ukraine is that the anti-Semites are to be found amongst the nationalists used as the shock troops of February's bogus revolution by the US, EU Zionist criminals pushing for war. But of course, the people who want war, the people who would profit from war, the people who want to drag Russia down for various reasons, the same people as attacked the British National Party and comrades like Fortunova, they never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But truth will out, particularly because when these sort of tricks were used to prepare the grounds for the First World War and prepare the grounds for the Second World War, if you own the newspapers or own the radios, you could tell people what you wanted and no one could answer back. In the days of the internet, it's hugely, hugely different, and every hoax these people try will simply end up blowing in their faces. So we'll not have a war. One day we'll have trials for the warmongers. And on that happy note, a happy Easter to you. It's a time of rebirth and hope. And I can tell you, you can hope for that rebirth. You can expect that rebirth. You'll see that rebirth, because our time will come.
Thank you very much, Nick. I'm now going to put my head in the sand and ignore everything for the next few days. A very happy Easter to your new arrival, and of course, you and yours. World news. Rate of Christian girls abducted and attacked by extremists on the rise in Egypt. Young Christian women are facing a greater risk of being kidnapped by extremists, tortured and even forced to convert to Islam since the Arab Spring ended in 2011. This year already has seen a spike in the incidents, according to a report by the non-profit advocacy group International Christian Concern. It's been estimated by the ICC and other watchdog groups in the region that there have been 500 reported cases of young women being attacked by Muslim men since 2011, but unreported cases could send the figure much higher. The girls are often assaulted, raped, kidnapped, forced to change their faith and sometimes killed, the ICC said. Making matters worse, nothing is being done by local authorities to prevent it in provinces across Egypt, according to officials from both the ICC and the Clarion Project, a US-based non-profit think tank and advocacy group. World at 8. You would think the UN and NATO and the EU would get their fingers out of their butts and stick them in something that really counts, not the sodding Ukraine and gas. Adelaide-based Sheikh Sharif Hussein free to preach race hate. Police say they will not act against a radical preacher who publicly prayed for the slaughter of Hindus and Buddhists, leaving him free to spread his message of hatred. According to the translation of the Arabic video published by the US-based Middle East Media Research Institute, the Sheikh publicly prayed, "Oh Allah, count the Buddhists and Hindus one by one. Oh Allah, count them and kill them to the very last one." Oh, World at 8. Oh goody. That leaves the BNP the option to go to Australia and preach anti-Islamic hatred and call for the beheading of all Muslims in that country, does it? Or is it one law for one and one law for another, as in the United Kingdom? Thought for the day. Rochdale, oh how are thy fallen. During all the massive and inescapable tripe coming from the media, the one thing that reared its ugly and forgotten head amidst all the horrible Cyril Smith stories was a small half-paid insert in the Daily Mail 12th of April. Under the heading of "A monstrous cover-up", my heart leapt a beat and I thought, wonderful, some proper reporting at last, and then I read it. My heart sank. The second heading was "Lust and Greed of Grooming Gangs", so I did think that maybe, just maybe, poor little Charlene and Paige and countless others whose bodies have ended up never being found would be vindicated. However, as usual, I was sadly disappointed. Sadly, all the perverse and nasty memories that have apparently been dormant for many years from many so-called important people have come to light in Rochdale of all places, and once again the title "Sex Gangs" used, as the perverted Muslim grooming of youngsters that has once again been passed off to the public. The texts were written by one of the authors of Smile for the Camera, The Double Life of Cyril Smith, by Simon Danjuk and Matthew Baker, and it started while I was still gathering evidence about Smith's years of abuse. Another paedophilia scandal broke in Rochdale, and the Rochdale Nine mentioned as being sentenced in 2012. This article claims the same title for the sexual abuses of the late and hugely obese Smith and the nearly 30 years systematic non-female Muslim abuse by Muslims in Rochdale who settled there in the 1950s and overtook huge enclaves of streets and businesses in that town. With them came the culture of this particularly nasty form of sexual abuse, and it is this, the Muslim culture of cruelty to non-Muslim children, that has been and is still being ignored by the media and thus, eventually, by the public. Various names were bandied about in this article, namely Cheryl Eastwood, Director of Children's Services in 2012, who made the usual noises of young girls being systematically raped, but it was a new and unusual thing. Keith Vaz, who of course jumped heavily on that bandwagon with remonstrations about attitude, and Roger Ellis, Chief Exec of the Council, all of course on their way out of the firing line. Anger in the room was mentioned at one stage, but of course this is controlled media anger and can be handled because the basic question of who were the culprits committing these crimes was, and still is, totally ignored. People in high places or clinging onto the bottom of the celebrity rock stick to the same mantra of shock and horror and hold various investigations, but never really get to the root of any particular problem, let alone this insidious and life-altering and still ongoing crime. Smith was a homosexual paedophile. His was sex-driven and thoroughly nasty and should not be aligned with any other sort of paedophilia, let alone dismissed with the grooming gangs whose main mission is money and control and not sexual urges, however odd this may seem. The only thing that links Smith with the average Muslim groomer is that the authorities dismiss the victims equally. Smith's boys were bad boys and the gang's girls are always vulnerable and chose that way of abuse for themselves. All absolute rot. The police might have been angry at the way that Smith was removed from their grasp, But they showed no anger at the way in which local Muslims had been abusing the local young girls and ignored all the previous reports that landed on the desks of the Rochdale authorities, because it would make community relations difficult and might incite revenge attacks on the Muslim communities attitude. And it is this attitude that is still prevalent today. Every time an infamous sexual predator is discovered, along with Savile and Smith, Rochdale gang rears its very ugly and yet to be fully publicised head in the media. The sad truth is, as we approach this Christian Easter holiday, amidst all the flammery, excuses, lies and cock-ups are two facts. 1. No one is going to accuse any Muslim or raid his house, take away his belongings, strip his family of British citizenship, take away all state benefits, fine them large amounts of money for the victims and deport the entire family of any abuser back from whence they originally came, not with the three main political parties. Secondly, there is still a class system of sorts in this country, and no one, apart from the British National Party, are going to bother with the disappearance of the young girl Charlene from a strangely non-functioning family who, along with mates, gave blowjobs to packets for chips. And that is the truth, and the reason why the Muslims pick who they do, and not the daughters of a wealthy local builder who has contacts in the local council, and that is another fact. That is also the reason why it has remained a hidden crime for so long. R.I.P. Paige and Charlene. And finally, Scrabble, anyone? This has got to be one of the cleverest things I've received in a while. Someone out there must be deadly at Scrabble. Wait till you see the last one. Presbyterian, when you arrange the letters, best in prayer. Astronomer, when you arrange the letters, moonstarer. Desperation, when you arrange the letters, a rope ends it. The eyes, when you rearrange the letters, they see. George Bush, when you rearrange the letters, he bugs Gore. The Morse code, when you arrange the letters, here come the dots. Dormitory, when you rearrange the letters, dirty room. Slot machines, when you rearrange the letters, cash lost in me. Animosity, when you arrange the letters, is no amity. Election results, when you rearrange the letters, lies, let's recount. Snooze alarms, when you rearrange the letters, alas, no more zzz. A decimal point, when you rearrange the letters, I'm a dot in place. The earthquakes, when you rearrange the letters, that queer shake. 11 plus 2, when you rearrange the letters, 12 plus 1. And for the grand finale, mother-in-law, when you rearrange the letters, comes out as woman Hitler. I don't agree with that. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and safe Easter. World at 8 is taking Easter Monday off in celebration of the risen Lord Jesus Christ, but we'll be back with you on Wednesday.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Good Friday, 18th of April 2014. Romanian Gypsy aims to earn £40,000 on benefits during just 1 year in Britain. 1,000 worshippers gather for Southend Mosque opening. Unmarked police car stolen from the Doddinghurst home of a sleeping Met Plus. Moved to the UK just days after restrictions on migrants from Romania and Bulgaria were lifted on January the 1st this year. In a new Channel 5 documentary which was broadcast 11th of April, Mr Lazar says he hopes to gather the eye-watering sum so he can build a new house for his family back in Romania. The 36-year-old says, I know it's very, very easy to take benefits in England. She give me home free, she's give me money free, she give me everything. I need maybe 40,000 from benefits, £40,000 for my family, and I think this money I can make in 1 year's maybe two. Gypsies on Benefits and Proud looked at the lives of 3 Roma gypsy families who have moved to the UK. One claim a staggering £750 a month on benefits in Nottingham. World at 8. We shouldn't let foreign cripples in anyway, and that goes for Asians and Africans as well as Eastern Europeans. What gets me, and eludes all the other political parties, is that there are at least 2 generations of British English workers who are in fact paying for these people, and it is the establishment, bankers and governments who are playing God in the distribution of other people's money. Deport or make life difficult for all these parasites. Not easy come, easy go. We have human rights as well, don't we? I'm going to change my name from Mozart to Lazar. 1,000 worshippers gather for peace officer. Foreigner convicted in Finland of aggravated sexual assault of 13-year-old pleads ignorance, says it's legal back home. Pope washes feet of 12 disabled, including a Muslim. Nick Griffin, MEP from the belly of the beast. Rate of Christian girls abducted and attacked by extremists on the rise in Egypt. Adelaide-based Sheikh Sharif Hussein free to preach race hate. Thought for the day, Rochdale, oh how are thy fallen. And finally, Scrabble anyone? UK News. Romanian Gypsy aims to earn £40,000 on benefits during just 1 year in Britain. Father of 3, Ion Lazar, Gypsy revealed how he's able to claim a £750 in monthly taxpayer handouts, while others are shameless about how very easy it is to claim benefits in the United Kingdom. Slovakian Roma Katerina Sizarova, 43, lives with 11 children and 11 grandchildren in and around an estate in Rotherham. In the 7 years she's lived in the UK, she's worked for only a handful of days. She lives with her unemployed husband Peter and their 4 youngest kids who are teenagers. They receive an incredible £430 a week. Viorel Dinu, 25, lost both his legs in an accident when he was 7-year-old and now moves around on a skateboard. While he had to beg for a living in Romania, he is able to